Mic check. 1, 2. Are we recording? Hi, I'm Michelle Bernstein, an award-winning chef, restaurateur, and mom. I have a lot on my plate, including my psoriatic arthritis symptoms. That's why I was prescribed Cosentyx. It helps me move better.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for people 2 years of age and older with active psoriatic arthritis. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some were fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at 1-844-COSENTYX or Cosentyx.com.
Ask your rheumatologist about Cosentyx.
It's The Other Side of Midnight with Frank Morano.
This is The Other Side of Midnight. I'm Frank Morano. One of the frustrating things to me about this presidential campaign, going all the way back to the Trumpless primary debate. So this is not a criticism only of Donald Trump. It's a criticism of everybody, including us, those of us in the media who supposedly are supposed to cover these presidential campaigns and maybe focus the country's attention on certain issues. There is no discussion in the campaign about the debt crisis we're facing. We have borrowed a ton of money and are poised to borrow a whole lot more. And the reason that's significant, we'll get into somebody that's much more able to explain this than I am, is that because every bit of interest that we spend on the national debt is essentially money that's flushed down the toilet, not used to pay one soldier, not used to build one highway. It's gone. And the portion of debt service that we're paying is reaching record levels, both in terms of raw numbers and in terms of percentage of GDP. Someone who has been sounding the alarm on this issue for a long time is one of the most outspoken political independents in this country, the former Comptroller General of the United States. He was also a bigwig with the No Labels organization, which we talked about from time to time before they made the decision not to field a candidate. I am very, very pleased to welcome author and the former Comptroller General of the United States, Dave Walker. David Walker, thanks so much for joining me on the radio.
Frank, it's great to be with you. Thank you for the opportunity.
You know, when I was telling some friends and family that I was excited to have you back on the show today, the most common response that I got was, I've actually never heard of that office, Comptroller General. What does the Comptroller General actually do? So I wasn't expecting to ask this question first, but since a lot of us apparently need a refresher in terms of what the Comptroller General actually does, I think that's as good of a place as any to start. What did you do as the Comptroller General? I know you worked in both Republican and Democratic administrations, but what did you do?
Well, Frank, the Comptroller General of the United States is effectively the Auditor General of the United States, the de facto Chief Accountability Officer of the United States, and the Chief Executive Officer of a congressional branch agency called the Government Accountability Office, the GAO. And it's the longest term of any position in the government, 15-year term where you can only be removed by impeachment or joint resolution of Congress signed by the president for specified reasons. So it's a very unique position with a very complex appointment process.
And clearly, you would think you know something about finance if you're serving in that position, and especially the country's finances. It's interesting. You go with the pronunciation of comptroller, saying the P rather than just controller. I'm sure that's one of the controversial issues that's dogged you over the years.
Well, there is something called the controller of the U.S. Comptroller, which is in the Office of Management and Budget, which is about 2 levels down in a different
Gotcha.
level of government. There's also something called the Comptroller of the Currency, which is in the Treasury Department, which obviously oversees the regulation of banks. So there is confusion about it, but there's only a few jobs in the government that are of the United States, less than 10. I had one of them, and I was pleased and proud to have it.
All right. So as I alluded to, you were a co-founder with No Labels, and the kind of the game plan of No Labels was to put forward a potential third-party ticket, one Democrat and one Republican, begin the process of securing ballot access, and put an alternative to what looked like it was going to be Trump and Biden, and now is Trump and Harris. I know a lot of people, even in my own life, that were talking about who they were going to be writing in for the presidential election that I think would have voted for a No Labels candidate. I'm actually a member of No Labels. Two-part question here, David. One, why did No Labels make the decision not to field a candidate? And two, I, as a member, didn't get to vote on that. Shouldn't that be something that all the membership got to vote on rather than just the leadership?
Well, Frank, you and I are both very disappointed that No Labels did not run a third option unity ticket. I think the bottom line is that 70% of Americans were not happy with the choices that they were given. I think there was unique opportunity. I think it's still about 70% of Americans aren't happy with the choice that they're going to have to make on November 5th of this year. Several things happened, but one of the things that happened that was very unexpected is that former Senator Joe Lieberman, who was really a major force with No Labels and very much involved in this effort, passed away suddenly, and that had a very traumatic and adverse effect on the effort. In the final analysis, you have to keep in mind that No Labels said that they would only run a ticket if they felt it could win in the Electoral College. Mm-hmm. They were in it to win it. And in the final analysis, they didn't think that they had somebody who could be at the top of the ticket who could meet that criteria. In my personal opinion, they should have given it a go with a qualified and capable ticket, so see if it caught on. And if it didn't catch on, then pull the plug on it, which they could have done by the end of August. But, that's the past. And so now we're going to have to make a decision between the choices that we have. Looks like there's only about 7 states that are in play. And in my view, probably the key state is the Keystone State, which is Pennsylvania.
Well, we'll get into your analysis of the election in just a second, but I know it's unusual to actually cover policy in the days leading up to an election, but I'd like to cover that at least a little bit. How bad is the current debt situation?
Frank, I think the greatest threat to our economic security, our international standing, our national security, and our domestic tranquility is the fact that our finances are deteriorating dramatically. If you can't put your finances in order, then all of those dimensions that I just mentioned are going to suffer. And we're now in a situation where we have almost $36 trillion in debt. But that's just the tip of the iceberg, because when you count unfunded civilian and military pensions, retiree health care, unfunded Social Security, Medicare obligations, the real number is well over $125 trillion and growing faster than the economy. The second largest line item in the U.S. budget is interest. And as you mentioned before, what do you get for interest? Nothing. We're on track for it to be the largest line item in the budget, exceeding Social Security within the next few years. And yet, neither one of the major presidential candidates are talking about it. What are they going to do to put our finances in order? They're also not talking about what are they going to do to save Social Security from a 21% across-the-board cut in benefits in 9 years if nothing is done. And I will say that in the free and equal debate, which I had the honor of co-moderating last week, we did ask questions on both of those issues, and the candidates did respond, which is very different from what the two major presidential candidates have done to date.
I want to ask you about the free and equal debate in just a moment. At 30 minutes after the hour, this is The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is David Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States. When we talk about the military, right, it's easy for people to understand that if we're invaded by another country, we need the military to fight off that invasion. When we talk about things like student loan relief, people see exactly how student loan relief affects them and their bottom line. If they can't afford to go to the doctor and there's a government program through Medicare or Medicaid that makes it possible for them to go to the doctor, they understand how that affects them. I think people also have a pretty keen understanding of how tax rates affect them. Debt and government debt is the one issue that I don't know that most Americans fully comprehend in terms of how it affects them. So I don't mean to be glib when I phrase the question this way, but I guess my question is, who cares? There's a lot of debt, both in terms of raw numbers and in terms of percentage of GDP. Why should I, as an individual American, care that we have a lot of debt? We know it's bad, but why is it bad for me and for the country?
Well, several things. One, most Americans understand that you can't spend more money than you make, charge it to the credit card, without having some day of reckoning. And while a country is very different than an individual, no country is exempt from the laws of prudent finance. Secondly, if you look at history, one of the leading indicators of countries falling from great power, going all the way back to the Roman Republic, was fiscal irresponsibility. Rome was the longest-standing superpower in the history of the world, over 1,000 years, and it fell for several reasons: fiscal irresponsibility, political incivility, moral decline, overextended military, and inability to control its borders. Do those sound familiar? Sure. In addition to that, you look at what's happened recently. The federal government spent way too much money, ran way too high in deficits, ended up, the Federal Reserve ended up keeping interest rates too low for too long, bought most of that extra debt, and as a result of that, we had excess inflation. When the House changed in 2020, in the last election, the Congress was no longer able to follow the modern monetary theory, and as a result of that, we kept from getting worse, but we haven't gotten better. So, bottom line is, we're never going to pay off our debt. Some level of debt is fine. I think we can deal with 90% of debt to GDP, but we're well over that now. We're headed much, much higher. That's going to constrain economic growth, individual opportunity. It's going to crowd out our ability to invest for the future. We are mortgaging the future of our country and our kids and grandkids, which is irresponsible, unethical, and immoral. And it must stop.
You mentioned mortgaging. You used that word, mortgage. Most people can relate to the idea of a mortgage. My wife and I have a mortgage on our house because we determined that it was the best thing for our family and for us and for our quality of life to take on a whole bunch of debt, more than we'd ever accrued in a lifetime, in order to buy a house. How much of the problems that the country is facing is about the debt itself, and how much is about the wisdom of each individual spending decision? Are we spending money imprudently as well as spending a lot of it? By the way, if people are just tuning in, I'm Frank Morano. This is The Other Side of Midnight. My guest is David Walker. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, in my view, Frank, the government has grown too big, promised too much, subsidized too many, lost control of the budget, and is not managed for outcome-based results. Today, we're running deficits of about $2 trillion a year, and things are projected to get worse over time rather than better on our current path. The projections that we hear from like the Congressional Budget Office have unrealistic assumptions. They assume, for example, that we won't have a major recession. They assume that there'll be no new government programs. They assume that all of the tax cuts associated with Trump from the last administration will expire at the end of 2025. Those are totally unrealistic assumptions. And so, we're on an imprudent and unsustainable path. This needs to be a top priority for the next president of the United States. It hasn't been in the campaign, which some can understand that, but it needs to be. Last question is, there's a huge amount of waste in government, just a huge amount. I proposed about 10 years ago to create something called a government transformation commission, which would look at what's the federal government doing, how does that compare to the Constitution, what should it do, what should be devolved to lower levels of government, how should it end up reorganizing to make it, more streamlined and efficient, how can it end up, managing itself so we're linking resources to results. Because right now, believe it or not, even though we've been in business since 1789, the federal government still does not have a strategic plan. It still does not have outcome-based indicators to understand what's working, what's not working. And that's just unacceptable. So as a result, when something's not working, what do? They throw more money at it. And in many cases, you're throwing good money after bad results.
This podcast is supported by Progressive, a leader in RV insurance. RVs are for sharing adventures with family, friends, and even your pets. So if you bring your cats and dogs along for the ride, you'll want Progressive RV insurance. They protect your cats and dogs like family by offering up to $1,000 in optional coverage for vet bills in case of an RV accident, making it a great companion for the responsible pet owner who loves to travel. See Progressive's other benefits and more when you quote RV insurance at Progressive.com today. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Pet injuries and additional coverage and subject to policy terms.
With so many options, why choose Arizona State University?
For me, the only online option was ASU because of the quality. Their faculty was really involved with their students and care about your personal journey. The dedication to my personal development from my professors, that's been extremely valuable to me.
Earn your degree from the nation's most innovative university. Online. That's a degree better. Explore more than 300 undergraduate, graduate, and certificate programs at asuonline.asu.edu.
Feel like you're stuck in career limbo? Clock in, clock out, repeat. No growth, no new opportunities. It's time to break out and break into tech. With CBT Nuggets, you can start building the IT skills that companies are hiring for right now. We make training fast, simple, and practical. From networking to cybersecurity, you'll get short, easy-to-watch videos and hands-on virtual labs so you can build real-world skills without expensive gear or complicated setups. For just $59 a month, you get unlimited access to our full training library. That includes certifications, skill-based learning, and practice exams, a $100 value included free. Learn anytime, anywhere, and get job ready on your terms. Thousands have used CBT Nuggets to launch new careers, and you can too. Right now, CBT Nuggets is offering a free trial. Easily find the training you need and test it out with no commitment. Start your 7-day free trial now at cbtnuggets.com. Don't wait. A better job is just a few clicks away.
Well, and that leads me to my next question. That's one specific example of what we could do to right the ship. Clearly, the two major presidential candidates, most of their policy prescriptions would make the debt problem worse. That's not me saying this. This is the fiscal impact as measured by everybody. With both of them are proposing some form of tax relief. Both of them are proposing some form of spending increase. What would you do if whoever the president is or any presidential candidate, what would you tell them the country needs to do in order to get the ship on a firmer financial footing?
Several things. One, the next president has to acknowledge that this is a serious problem. They'll make it a priority, and that the future of our country and our families is at stake if we don't deal with it. Secondly, we need a statutory fiscal sustainability commission that learns the lessons from Simpson Bowles. That was not statutory. That engages the American people with the facts, the truth, the tough choices, solicits input, makes a package of recommendations with a guaranteed up or down vote in Congress. The people are way ahead of the politicians. I've done speeches in 47 states, 2 territories, and several countries on this. They get it. They're part of the answer. Ultimately, the Congress has to act. But people have to be in the lead rather than the laggards here. Thirdly, I mentioned to you already about this government transformation commission about the size and scope of government and how it measures success. And fourthly, and probably most importantly, we need a constitutional amendment that limits how much debt as a percentage of the economy we can take on and how much spending as a percentage of GDP the federal government would engage in. And I'm working on all of those things. And interestingly, the states may end up asserting their rights to propose such an amendment. And we may have a historic announcement within the next couple of months of the states doing so because Congress has failed to act.
You know, I remember in the 90s during the Contract with America era, everybody was talking about, that was one of the planks of the Contract with America, a balanced budget amendment, which sounds not exactly, but somewhat similar to what you're proposing. And one of the things that some people brought up, because a lot of the Republicans that were pushing that said that a lot of cities and states are required to have a balanced budget. And one of the things that I think was omitted from that aspect of the debate is New York City, where I live, for instance, they have both a capital budget and an operating budget. The operating budget is a balanced budget, but they do take on new debt through capital projects. Do you envision, if a constitutional amendment like that ever comes to be, that there would be some sort of a capital budget as well for larger outlays?
My personal view is the federal government should have a capital budget, which is for investment, but that we need to make sure those investments are designed to generate a positive rate of return over time, which is not what the federal government does. They just throw money at things. They call it an investment, and in many cases it doesn't generate a positive rate of return. And secondly, an operating budget. And the reason that I say that we need to focus on debt to GDP is because that will prevent gaming. Otherwise, people may say, well, this is really an investment. We're going to put it in, we're going to put it in the capital budget, so we don't really need to balance the operating budget. And at the federal level, having a balanced budget on the operating side, given the fact that we do have recessions, we do have, other things that come up at the federal level that may not come up at the state level, it doesn't really make sense. And as you know, Frank, all but one state has a balanced budget requirement. But there are a bunch of states, including your state, that aren't in a good financial condition because how do you define balanced budget? The way they defined it is balancing cash flows, which means that they don't consider huge unfunded pension obligations, huge unfunded retiree health obligations. And in some cases, states go out and borrow money, generate cash from borrowing that money, and they call that as part of the revenue to balance the budget, which is a bad joke. Try that at your bank.
All right. I know it's late, and I appreciate you being so generous with your time. I have to ask you about this Free and Equal debate that you were part of last week. Free and Equal is, I think, a terrific organization that I've been a supporter of and a promoter of for a long time. They promote fair ballot access laws. They promote third-party candidates. I'm a third-party guy. I've always been a third-party guy. You were the co-moderator of a debate featuring the Green Party candidate for president, the Libertarian Party candidate for president, and the Constitution Party candidate for president. I think they've all been on this show, and I think they're all equally impressive in various ways. Certainly no shortage of opinion on all three of their parts. Why did you want to be a part of this debate? What were you hoping to get out of this experience, and what are you hoping the American public gets out of this?
Well, I believe in choice and competition. That's one of the things that the American Republic was founded on, and unfortunately, the two major parties don't like competition, in particular the Democratic Party. But the fact is that I felt that it was important that we be able to address some of the issues that had not been addressed to date, including the two that we've talked about, the putting our finances in order and how do we take steps to save Social Security, as well as some other issues. So I was approached by Christina Tobin, given the opportunity to co-moderate. I thought it was a very good debate. It was civil, it was substantive. We addressed the issues that were of major concern to the American people. There were a few issues where there were significant differences of opinion, such as on Israel and Gaza, such as on the border, and such as on abortion. But for the most part, the candidates actually answered the questions they were asked and we're civil in doing so. And I think that's a positive thing, and we need to see that more with regard to the major candidate debates.
Were there any candidates that stood out as really impressing you?
Well, I wouldn't want to say anything that wouldn't be, in fact, a de facto endorsement.
Sure.
But I would, I would say that there is a poll that's being conducted right now, asking people their opinion about who won the debate. And so let's wait and see what the results of that poll was. It's interesting because obviously Randall Terry with the Constitution Party was pretty conservative, as you would expect, being a constitutionalist. Okay. Jill Stein with the Green Party was pretty progressive. And Chase Oliver with the Libertarian Party was both ways. Okay. On some things he was very conservative. On other areas he was progressive because of the philosophy of the Libertarian Party. Right. And so, people will have to make up their own mind. Let's see what the result of the poll is.
All right. Do you think there's value in terms of the people that already know who they're voting for and may have even already voted? Let's say they know they're for Harris or they know they're for Trump. Is there value for those folks in still watching a debate like this, the free and equal debate featuring the alternative candidates? And if there is, what is the value?
I think what the value is to be able to understand some of the issues that the American people are concerned about and to get them to press the candidates who they are considering, whether it be one of these three candidates or the two major party candidates, for answers on how they would address these issues. In particular, the issue of how are we going to put our finances in order. And I don't expect them to give detailed answers. It could be more process-oriented, which what you and I have talked about, but that they'll make it a priority. How are they going to save Social Security? Because both of the major candidates have said they're not going to touch it. Well, if you don't touch it, that means you're for 21% across the board cutting benefits in 9 years, because that's what you get if you don't touch it. Okay? And so they can consider these three candidates, but just as importantly, if not more importantly, to be able to start pressing the two major party candidates to be able to address these issues that are critically important for the future of our nation and our families.
I was sorry to see that the thing that got most reported on regarding the free and equal debate was the mistake that the singer Loomis made in the national anthem. But I gather the people that were watching in person in Los Angeles, that wasn't their biggest takeaway.
No, it wasn't. And quite frankly, I was there. There was kind of a false start, if you will. Mm-hmm. I felt badly for her. But in all candor, I didn't hear the words that have been reported when I was sitting there because the sound wasn't as great. But, the debate, as I said, was civil. It was substantive. It's definitely worth watching. I will tell you that I think there were too many breaks for entertainment. Mm-hmm. Which kind of cut the flow a little bit and also cut our ability to ask two or three more questions that I wanted to ask.
By the way, I'm going to link to the video of the debate. If people want to watch it, they can go to my Facebook page right now, facebook.com/MoranoFan. Lastly, I've been wanting to ask you this question for over a decade. The last time I saw Ross Perot on national television, he was on C-SPAN with you, and you guys were talking about a lot of the same issues that we're talking about now, debt and all sorts of other things. And I'm a great admirer of Ross Perot, always have been. And he talked about this book that he was coming out with in that interview with you. But obviously, Mr. Perot has passed on now. But the book never came out. What happened? I've always wondered what the deal was with that.
Well, his family decided not to release the book for a variety of reasons. I was honored and pleased to be able to do that interview with Ross Perot Sr. It was, in fact, his final public interview. And Ross, that year, it was 2012, it was the primary funder of the 27-state, 10,000-mile National Fiscal Responsibility bus tour that I led, called the 10 Million a Minute Tour, because our our total liabilities and unfunded promises were going up 10 million a minute. Now they're going up more than 10 million a minute. One of the things that I've published since then is America in 2040, still a superpower, ? An updated version came out earlier this year, which really addresses a lot of the economic security, national security, and other issues that Ross and I cared about and that, frankly, need to be addressed by the next president.
All right. If people want to check out the book or learn more about the path that we're on come 2040, they can go to americain2040.com. That's americain2040.com. And if I ever get you for a whiskey in a New York bar, I'm going to get you to tell me what went on behind the scenes with that book not being released. David Walker, it's always a treat to talk with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Frank. All the best.
All right. Again, americain2040.com. And again, if you want to see that debate, I have the whole debate on my Facebook page. Take a look, facebook.com/Morano fan. If you want to comment on any portion of our discussion, be my guest, 646-720-0635. That's 1-646-720-0635. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Straight ahead.